competitive stamina. And you've got to have the ability to compete every day and through whatever the situation might be. And no one feels good about losing football games.
The Bucs are 7-5, second in the division behind the Saints, guys. So Tampa has now lost 2 in a row. Tom Brady has not lost 3 games in a row in 18 years, Max Kellerman. So history is on his side with this one. But do you think this weekend is a must-win for this Bucs team to get things back on track?
Hell no. Hell no. Look, first of all, let's talk about the playoffs. You got one team coming out of the NFC East. You got at least one team out of the North. That's 2. Remember, 7 teams are going to make it. You got at least 2 out of the West. We're up to 4. And you got at least 1 out of the South, the Saints. That's 5. So there are 2 slots and 3 likely contenders. The Vikings at 6-6, the Cards at 6-6, and the Bucs at 7-5. So not only are they a game up on the 2 teams competing against them, but look at the schedule. Even if the Vikings win this game, look at who those guys have. The Vikings have they have one tough game on the schedule, and I think it's against the Saints. And the Cards have a couple tough games on the schedule. By the way, including the Giants. They have maybe 3 tough games on the schedule, and the Rams. Look at the Bucs. Look at the Bucs. Look at this. They got the Vikings, a game they might win, but let's say they lose it. Remember, they're a game up. Then they got the Falcons twice and the Lions. Bucs are in the playoffs, people. They're not going to miss the playoffs. So is it a must-win? Well, they have to start feeling good about themselves. Look, Brady has a lot of wisdom. I think when he talks about winning and competitive stamina, everyone should listen. The man knows what he's talking about as well as anyone who ever lived, right? From that point of view. However, 3 consecutive games is plenty of time to start feeling good about yourself, build momentum, and start to play better. And it's against the right teams. 2 against the Falcons, 1 against the Lions. This ain't a must-win. I rest my case.
Well, I disagree with you. And the reason why I disagree with you is because this is not a question as to whether or not they need it in order to make the playoffs. This is a question because psychologically they've been damaged. When they've gone against stiffer competition this season, they've struggled. The reality is when you're beating Denver and you're beating the Los Angeles Chargers and you're beating the Carolina Panthers, you look pretty damn good, just like you expected to look good with 2 of your last 3 games against the Atlanta Falcons and mixed in between games, a game against the Detroit Lions. So the bottom line is when you come playoff time, they're not Green Bay. They're not New Orleans. They're not Seattle. They're not the Los Angeles Rams. These are the kind of teams that you're going to have to deal with if you are indeed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when you have a problem because you got the 27th ranked rushing attack because you forget to give the ball to Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette, when you sit up there and Antonio Brown arrives and you don't look the same because you're prioritizing getting him the ball and getting him some playing time, and the deep threat that was Scott Miller or helped spreading your offense, suddenly he's being underutilized as well. And you see people complaining about that stuff too. These are the kind of things that you have to fix. If Tom Brady was playing with Bill Belichick, then we wouldn't be as concerned about it. And I'm not just even talking about the greatness of Bill Belichick. I'm talking about the continuity factor. But because we're talking about Tom Brady with Bruce Arians and how people have been speculating as to whether or not Bruce Arians is even going to be there next year because they're questioning whether or not he and Tom Brady are an actual mix. All of those things come into play. And I think beating Minnesota and closing out these last 4 games, winning all 4 of them, would go a long way towards it. I think another loss to a decent team like Minnesota, who's been coming on strong lately, hits you more psychologically. You might be able to overcome it a little bit with the 2 Atlanta Falcons game and the Detroit games. But still in all, I wouldn't like it. I think it's important to win this game this weekend.
But you look at when you say the Vikings have been winning, they beat Jacksonville by a field goal. They beat the Panthers by a point. They lost to the Cowboys.
I said they've been coming on
this
better
Vikings
lately.
team has not been playing good.
They've been coming on better later.
Yeah, better, but that's damning them with faint praise. They have not been good. They've been squeaking by bad teams, and not always, as was the case with the Cowboys. Before that, they had a little run through the NFC North. They've been actually playing worse and worse. It's being masked by an easy schedule. Meantime, the Bucs, who have they lost to recently? They got shellacked by the Saints. Yes, the Saints, if you've noticed, have been shellacking the entire league. They've been destroying everybody. And then they lost to the Rams and the Chiefs in competitive games. Like, those are some of the best teams in football, right? Like, we're talking about, I just named maybe 3 of the 5 best teams in the NFL. And most of the time, the Bucs are competitive in losing. The Vikings are just getting squeakers by the dregs, by the bottom feeders. And that's why
they
looks
also
like
beat Green Bay,
Evens,
though.
like, if you...
They also beat Green Bay.
Yeah, no, I'm saying they made a little run through the NFC North about a month ago, right? They beat the Lions, they beat the Bears, and they beat the Packers. They were on a little run, and then they started playing poorly. They lost to the Cowboys. They squeak by the Panthers, squeak by the Jags. They could, if you want to say it's a must-win game against the Vikings, it's because the Vikings ain't that good, and you should really beat that team. My point is, even if you lose to that team, you're going to make the playoffs. You should sweep the last 3 games of the season. It's against bad opposition. I don't see why this is must-win.
Again, because of all the things we've talked about with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they don't seem to be on the same page. I'm not saying that you win because, again, I'm not thinking about the playoffs. Of course, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm thinking along the lines of you being in the right psychological position to make that run so many of us predicted you'd be able to pull off. Starting the season, we all speculated as to whether or not Tampa Bay was going to win the NFC South. But because we know that New Orleans had played together and they got Drew Brees and all of this other stuff. But when you looked at Tampa Bay, you expected Bruce Arians, along with Tom Brady, to be on the same page, particularly with the multitude of weapons and Evans and Godwin and Gronk, O.J. Howard before he went down. We didn't even know about Scott Miller. We certainly didn't know that Antonio Brown was going to end up there. You had Ronald Jones with Leonard Fournette. You certainly did not expect them to have as much trouble as they've had on the football field, particularly with Brady and Arians on the same page. I think every game is pivotal the rest of the way because of that relationship and how it needs to be once the playoffs arrive.
This is a 10 or 11 win team on paper. They're going to win 10 or 11 games this year. This is what it was supposed to be.
All right, Vikings, Bucs, that's 1 Eastern on Sunday. When we come back here on First Take, we've got some NBA to discuss. LeBron James won the chip this year, but are the fellas confident he can repeat in the Wild Wild West? We'll be right back.
We are open at last. Hail.
We want the marriage to be.
No, sir. Not in mama's house.
Debbie does everything.
Prepare to get some creepy repair.